Did you know there's a place on Earth where an invisible barrier exists? An invisible wall that no animal, bird, or fish can cross. It sounds unbelievable, doesn't it? But it's true. Today, we're taking you to one of the world's most mysterious locations, where nature itself has created an invisible boundary known as the Wallace Line. This remarkable line lies between the Indonesian islands of Bali and Lombok. Although these islands are separated by only 35 kilometers, 22 miles, the wildlife on each side has remained almost completely different for millions of years. Yes, despite being so close together, animals from one side simply do not naturally cross to the other. It almost feels as if an invisible force prevents them from doing so. Let me explain. On one side of the line, you'll find one group of animals, birds, and marine life. On the other side, you'll encounter an entirely different collection of species. If you travel from Bali to Lombok, you'll notice that the surrounding environment changes dramatically in what seems like an instant. The strangest part is that this invisible boundary affects nearly every form of wildlife. Humans can easily travel across it, but the native animals rarely do. Even the bird populations are surprisingly different on each side, and many species of fish also belong to completely separate ecosystems. So what is hiding within this 35-kilometer stretch that keeps nature divided? To understand this mystery, we have to travel back about 150 years. In the mid-19th century, British naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace made one of the most important discoveries in the history of biology. At the time, he had no idea that his observations would completely change the way scientists understood the natural world. Wallace himself had an extraordinary life. Born into a modest family in England, he loved learning from an early age. However, financial hardship forced him to leave school and work alongside his father, who was a cartographer. That decision unexpectedly shaped the course of his life. As he traveled to different regions, Wallace became fascinated by nature. He collected plants, insects, birds, and countless other species, carefully documenting everything he observed. Then, in 1854, he sailed just 35 kilometers from Bali to Lombok. The moment he arrived, he realized something was different. He encountered animals unlike anything he had seen on Bali. The wildlife looked completely foreign. Species related to Australia's unique fauna appeared, while many familiar Asian animals were nowhere to be found. Wallace and his companions were astonished. Why did this island contain such different creatures? Where had they come from? And why weren't they living on nearby islands? He became convinced that some powerful natural force was separating these ecosystems, but finding the answer would take time. Not long afterward, Wallace became seriously ill with malaria and was forced to rest for an extended period. Ironically, it was during this recovery that the idea behind the mysterious boundary finally came together in his mind. While reflecting on his observations, Wallace realized this couldn't be a coincidence. The differences between the animals, birds, and fish of Bali and Lombok were simply too great. Three major questions occupied his thoughts. Why didn't the wildlife from the two islands mix? Why were even the bird populations so different? And why were the marine species on each side unlike one another? Eventually, Wallace developed a groundbreaking theory. He proposed that long ago, the islands on either side of this boundary belonged to two completely different continental landmasses. According to Wallace, the animals of Bali were originally connected to Asia, while the animals of Lombok belonged to the ancient landmass that became Australia. As sea levels rose over millions of years, deep ocean channels formed between these regions. Those deep waters became a permanent natural barrier that most land animals could never cross. As a result, Asian species such as elephants, tigers, and many other Asian mammals evolved separately from Australian animals like kangaroos, koalas, and countless unique species found farther east. Over millions of years, the wildlife on each side followed completely different evolutionary paths. At the time, Wallace's theory revolutionized biology. It didn't just explain why the animals were different, it changed humanity's understanding of evolution, geography, and the natural world itself. Today, modern science has confirmed that Earth's continents are constantly moving through the process of plate tectonics. The continents slowly drift apart over millions of years, reshaping oceans, islands, and ecosystems. Although Wallace didn't have access to today's technology, his observations were remarkably accurate. He showed that this invisible boundary wasn't only separating animals, the surrounding environment itself had changed. The ocean depths, climate, vegetation, soil, and entire ecosystems on each side evolved independently. To the average visitor, nothing unusual is visible, but to biologists, ecologists, and evolutionary scientists, the Wallace Line is almost as real as a physical wall. Wallace's discovery remains one of the greatest achievements in natural history and continues to influence modern science today. Just imagine it. Only 35 kilometers apart, yet for millions of years, nature has kept two completely different worlds separated by an invisible line that most wildlife has never been able to cross.